That's what you have to shut up.
Okay, so we are now streaming live. Oh,
we gotta wait till Robert gives the link is live.
oh, okay. Robert's making the link live now. Is he gonna let you know?
Yeah, he's texting me. Check the website.
All right, sounds like we are live on YouTube. So welcome everyone to our planning and zoning workshop. Thanks for everybody for being here, and welcome to everybody in the public or officials that are listening. Today our plan is to complete the review of Article 2, the draft land development. There's Jamie. Jamie,
Our aspirational
goal. I think we can do it. I've gone over the material again. I think it's reasonable, but we'll hope, see how much discussion emerges. But Jamie is joining us now. Matt Lamb, as I said, I think most of you heard, Matt Lamb is not going to be joining us. So they'll just be the 4 commissioners this evening. Hi, Jamie. Can you hear us okay?
Hi. Sorry for my tardiness. My computer forced a reboot and then took like 20 minutes to turn back on. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. You didn't make something at this point.
It's always the most convenient time when they do those things.
Absolutely, of course.
It's like you traveled to Iowa real quick, and that's why you're late.
No, I thought it might be late. That's like wetland.
Wetland restoration.
All right. Well, before we get started, does anybody have any housekeeping? Chairman Keith, did you have any thoughts for us before we get started? Or
I do not have any thoughts. I'm thoughtless today.
oh well, excellent.
It's gonna be a fast meeting then.
Yeah. How about you, Dan?
We got some stuff to kind of show you at the end, the preview for you. But I'll leave that so it's a cliffhanger.
Yeah, motivation to finish Article 2. You'll get some surprises at the end.
I did have a question.
Yeah.
Remember when we were doing the earlier module and it was supposed to have a map that coordinated with it? Did that map ever get done yet?
You talking about the zoning map?
Oh,
Which map are you
Yeah,
talking
which you gave us a map and you said it wasn't completed. And that was, I think that was like 2 modules ago, maybe.
It's probably the proposed zoning
yeah.
map.
Zoning map.
Yeah, it's I mean it is in its draft form now. It's all going to depend how this all shakes out. So we're not changing it yet until we send it in and adopt it with this code.
Okay. I just was curious because we hadn't talked about it in 2 modules or something.
Yeah, no, that's for the plan with the map change is it, procedurally that'll happen at the same time as we adopt the code. And I don't think anything will be rezoned, just the existing zones will be reclassified into their new zones.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, we can just go ahead and get started. Dan and I talked to Matt and went over some of his questions about the material earlier today, and he had some questions and discussion points, but he ended up not having any comments that he wanted to put on the record. And everybody received the pre-submitted comments, of which there were 12 sent out by email a few hours ago. Mm-hmm. I guess we'll get started on page 238. So page 38 of Article 2. you want to, I think this has been working fairly well where we just go sequentially through the pre-submitted comments. If people have other comments, speak up and jump in and we can take those kind of in order. And so Keith, did you want to talk about, you want to kick us off with the first comment on page 41?
Sure. Yeah, it was a little minor comment, but if I was understanding this correctly, that as the applicant put forward a potential zoning change request, I think that's what this one was. It said in here, one of the options is number 2, approval of the application with a reduction of the area proposed to be amended. And I think my question was if for whatever reason that was city council determined that, and the applicant determined, well, that really doesn't meet the intent of what they were looking for, would they just withdraw their application at that point, or how would that go forward?
They can. I mean, they have, until that final vote's done, they have every opportunity to withdraw. And we've had applicants in the past that have done that have gone up there and they've seen things going in a different direction and they've just asked to table and then ultimately withdrew it.
But would they, and I'm trying to understand this, is this the decision? So would that be that, so once this, I guess these are options for decision. So would they know before this decision that that's where city council was going with this, or would the city council just make this decision that, no, we're going to reduce this zoning?
Yeah, I think one of those scenarios would be like, let's say somebody owns 4 parcels on the edge of downtown and they're making a proposal to rezone them all from whatever zoning, let's say from whatever zoning they have to downtown Maitland. City council would have the option, instead of denying all of it, they would have, we feel pretty comfortable about these 3 parcels, but not the parcel number 4. So we're going to approve basically 3/4 of the request, and sorry, this one stays its zoning. And that's kind of, I guess the intent is to allow that kind of flexibility, so they don't have to just do an up or down vote, but they can approve part of the request, for example.
And applicants will be able to read the tea leaves. They'll know if things aren't going well, and it's never surprised if they're hearing comments from council, especially at the introduction hearing. If they're hearing stuff it's pretty bad, they'll either withdraw then, or they will during the hearing withdraw. But the footnote on that says that the council can either approve it, they can approve a reduction in either area or intensity. So it may be that someone's asking for a rezoning to get, I don't know, a DICE program, 67 units per acre. Council's like, well, it's really not that. It's really more of 55 is what we can support. So they can reduce the intensity or density or the land area is the way the footnote reads that.
Well, but I guess my point is the way I read this is that this is in front of city council. They're at that point of making a decision. Somebody makes a motion, and they make this motion. Well, let's approve it, but let's reduce this.
Yeah.
At that point, is it out of the applicant's hands? Like if the applicant didn't want it reduced?
No, the applicant can always get up and say that then we're going to withdraw.
Okay, all right. So they'll say
Rarely it happens, but it has happened before.
Okay, I just want to make sure that they could see that it didn't all of a sudden become a change that actually ended up hurting what they were trying to do.
Yeah, they'll have the opportunity, because usually in a meeting like that, the council will say, we're not comfortable with this applicant. Are you okay with this? And they'll be like, well, then never mind, I want to withdraw. Or
Okay, all right.
Okay, does anybody have anything before page 47?
I did on
Okay.
the next page on 2-42, down at number 9, 3A9.
when it says would not result in significant adverse impacts on the natural environment, who would be the one to decide what the adverse impact is?
That would be staff. So that would be the development review committee. Ultimately, we write the staff report.
Okay. It didn't say that, and that's why I was just wondering how that's originated and who determines water, air, noise, stormwater, wildlife, vegetation, wetlands, blah, 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 blah.
And I'm assuming they would have to be able to document those things for your review.
The applicant in many cases are asked to submit studies where appropriate over their impacts on that kind of thing. And the city also has in cases where we need to rely on different expertise, we have contracts with consultants that we can utilize for specialized review if necessary.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Would it be helpful? I guess I could share the screen. So we can dot it up there. You're right. Kind of forgot. Yep. Everybody see the document now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Very good. Anything before page 47?
I know this isn't the most exciting part of the code.
I find it the most exciting.
Do you? You're a sick man.
I saw it as going faster.
You had a question about number 6. Revisions to signage do not increase all signage by more than 10%. And as we were talking about plan developments and minor changes to plan development or minor deviations. You want to articulate your question?
Which one are you talking about?
I thought you had a question on 247.
Oh yeah, this was okay. This was about the signage. Yeah. I couldn't remember all of the mandated sign requirements, but I just making sure that what we were doing here sort of aligned with that. And I think I know you couldn't manage content, but looks like if I remember, you can have some say about the size and the area of the sign.
Precisely, you're remembering correctly.
We can regulate size, height, material, and duration. That content is not.
Yeah, and in this context, the fact that it's more than 10%, anything more than that, probably have to go back through DRC because it would, have some impact, some pretty more significant visual impact on the overall project.
Okay.
The next one is on page 52, and it's a typo. Do they have anything before then? Have that. Well spotted. Got that.
Or maybe it was just a stutter.
Definitely.
Sounds like a Star Wars character.
That.
Right. Moving right along through these discretionary approval procedures. We don't have another written comment until page 65. subdivision procedure. And this comment,
Yeah, this was just a question about consent agenda. Is that an understood terminology, or do we have a definition, or maybe it doesn't need one?
yeah, it is for us. I think I like this comment because people coming from, are not familiar with maybe parliamentary procedure or the way city councils run, or they do their city council differently. They might call this something else. So although we all know what this is, it might be good to at least have a footnote about explain it, or do you think it's necessary, Dan?
I think it's self-explanatory. We've been running, the city council runs on a consent and a regular agenda all the time. I think it's very common terminology used all around.
Okay.
Would you guys like a consent agenda?
Maybe I was just the only ignorant one of it. I mean, I know what it is because I've seen it in the city council, but I think I'd asked a question before, just trying to understand what is its, what amount of power does it have?
In theory, it makes it a lot faster because all of consent is approved in one motion and one vote. It's basically things that are cut and dry that meet all the intent of the ordinance. So there's really not a whole lot to discuss on it. It doesn't require public to get involved in it. Similar, like in this case, it's in the site plan. If the site plan meets the ordinance, it's a minor subdivision, site or subdivision plan, then if it meets all of the ordinance, then it's an approvable thing. It's not something that's open for it shouldn't be open for discussion or debate unless there's egregious error. And so you have a lot of things, like some of the contracts are done under consent. A lot of items, meeting minutes are done under consent with council. Things that don't really require a lot of discussion.
Yeah, and because it's a minor subdivision, it has to be, because it's going to ultimately result in a plat to be signed by the mayor. It does need to have that authorization from city council. But the reason why we specified consent agenda is because there's nothing really for city council to debate. There's no discretion, like Dan said, involved. So that's why we said the consent agenda, because they do formally need to grant the mayor permission to sign to approve the subdivision.
It's the current practice that we do now.
Now, I looked it up and Dan represented it well, so I guess I can leave it alone. It's actually definable that way.
Now, in some jurisdictions, their P&Zs have consent agendas too. And that's something that we toyed with for a while, but I don't think we put any in there.
We don't have enough volume decisions, right, for something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be one thing if we were approving 10 items a meeting, but
Yeah, it looks like this is just general terminology related to board meeting practice. So it's not necessarily meaning it's a city council, but any formal board can do this.
Correct.
okay, very good. All right, I think we don't have another comment until we start getting into waterfront structures and docks. I should say written comment.
Hang on one second. On those,
Hanging on.
you're going down.
No, just go, you're heading the right way to the required bonds.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I was trying to figure out why we would ask for a bonding company from the United States Treasury's list of approved bonding companies versus like the Florida Office of Insurance Regulation. Wouldn't we go with what is required as far as like, the state versus federal? I didn't know if is that normal?
It's not abnormal, but we can ask whether the state is sufficient enough. I know the US has a lot more, they're more federally backed as far as the bonds, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the state's not good enough for this. So it's a good question. We'll ask Claire on it.
I just didn't know if what was normally required.
I think this is carry forward language from what's currently in the code, if I'm not mistaken. So that's what we've been using in the city thus for a while at least. But we can look into that as soon as I get this keyboard to work.
I'm curious if there's any state ones that aren't on the list of the US Treasury.
Yeah, you would think that it would be probably both, but.
Yeah, we'll definitely look into that.
And then when it talks about
Oh, sorry, can you please say the name of that board again?
the Florida Office of Insurance Regulation, and then my next question had to do with, because the way it talks about, the subdivision and whatnot, and wouldn't, because of the way this is worded with the infrastructure dedicated to the city, what if if it's a new subdivision and it's gated, those streets are owned by the homeowners association typically, so they're private streets versus public streets. And I was just wondering if that had any impact on how this was worded. Do you understand what I'm asking?
Where are you at? I'm sorry.
Well, just when it talks about, so when it starts with the performance and maintenance bond required, and then you go into the next page and it talks about the amount of the performance bond shall be equal to 110% of the cost calculated. And just talking about, then it goes into the maintenance bond. And that's where I was like, well, what if it's if it's private streets versus public streets?
So it wouldn't be required. So this section about the bonds the section is when required. So we don't require them necessarily on private streets. We might have a performance bond just for the construction to make sure it's constructed to meet the city standards. But once it's turned over the maintenance to the HOA on a private street,
Correct.
We don't need a maintenance bond.
Right, and that was part of why I was asking that question.
No, it's a good question.
And then my final one on this is when it talks about an E, and it says the bond shall remain in force and effective until 2 years after final approval of the final subdivision plat or minor subdivision plat, whatever is applicable. Is it 2 years from when the city accepts the work, or is it just 2 years from the date, the permit is accepted, or whatever the wording is? Do you see what I'm asking?
Yeah. Is that final approval, like, not, because sometimes the final plat is approved and then it's not even recorded till sometime later.
I think it should be 2 years from the date that we have, that it's been turned over to the city, that we've accepted it.
Accepted it? Okay. Well, that's why I was asking, because it was kind of, we all know it gets approved, but then they may not start construction for.
Right. Absolutely. That was a good catch.
So it's from the time that the performance bond is refunded.
Which is the time that the city actually accepts the road.
Yeah, which is when they release the performance bond, right?
Correct.
Oh.
Okay, good catch.
All right, very good. Moving on, anything else on this page? Lot splits.
On 2-68, in that lot split, is this just the way we're looking at it now? like under two, right where you are, that applicability. When it makes reference to the subdivision in subsection B 3A. And I had to go back digging for where that was, and that was like 10 pages prior for the what it was referring to. Is that just because of the way we're looking at it now? And will that be different once this is put into effect as far as like any of the charts and whatnot that we're looking at? Do you see what I'm asking?
Whether, about the part that has to meet the requirements for a minor subdivision?
Yes. I just say some of these things I'm going back and if it makes a reference, I'm going back to see what it's referencing. And that one is actually 10 pages. It's on 2-58. And this is,
it does have a hyperlink. So if you actually click in the electronic document, like I did, it just takes you right there. But
okay.
yeah, so abuts an existing standard street. So this is all things that if it doesn't meet these requirements, then it does not qualify for a lot split. That's all that's.
Okay, but you answered my question. It's just going to be, you can click on it and you'll get to it without.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I can demonstrate it again. It's 60. So and you see how it turns into a little pointer. You click, it takes you right there.
Okay.
Pretty cool. All right. Anything else under lot splits or moving into the permit section? Here's our next written comment was for waterfront structure permits on page 80. Yeah, wetland alteration permit review standards. Glenn, I believe you had a question, comment on page 280.
I did. So this language was added back, if people remember, there was kind of a rectangular lake, Lake Jackson, over near I-4 that I think started out as a borrow pit, and it created a lot. I think the guy's name was Garfinkel that ended up suing the city, but essentially what happened was his next door neighbor put a dock in that they were entitled to put a dock in, and his view, if you picture the corner of a rectangular lot, significantly changed because all of a sudden he had a dock in front of him. But the dock to the homeowner was legal. And so this example came up in a lawsuit that was even local to this area, which was a billboard on 1792 got blocked by palm trees, and Clear Channel sued the property owners. And the judge came back and said, hey, Clear Channel, you don't own the view. And so my question about this particular language is, at what point are we empowering or so I have some docks on Lake Nina, and a couple people commented when those went in, hey, you changed my view. And the attorneys came back and said, but wait a minute, you're across the lake, or you don't own that view. And so we are communicating for a structure within 500 feet of a new waterfront structure. And therefore, take our discussion at the last meeting, those neighbors on Minnehaha Road are saying about that lake and that project that's up for discussion, you're ruining my view. And so my question was, this language, at what point is it appropriate? At one point, is it probably questionable about the legality of giving that power to someone who doesn't own the property?
Glenn, can you?
What bullet number is this on?
Specific- Can you say what specific part? you're
Yeah,
talking
sorry.
about?
So on what did I write? 280?
Mhm.
On that page, it said a waterfront structure. The proposed project, whether wetlands, the ability, whether the pros,
Which bullet are you talking? Bullet 4?
I'm looking for the exact bullet. Sorry, and maybe I was looking at a downloaded, I don't know if this has changed by,
Oh, you might have been talking about PDF 80, page 80. Is that
what I'm looking and downloaded in 2B, maybe yours is updated. And it had to do with waterfront structures.
I
So
think
it
water
was,
structures are further along than page 80.
oh, here, I have it up. I also have it up.
Yeah, where
On,
waterfront
It
structure,
might be 84, try 84. B,
it's 80, it's 81, Glenn, is it? Waterfront
okay, it may
structure-
be 81, and like I said last night, I'm reading it's 280, but I knew it's around here.
The review standards,
Yep.
is it?
84, B3.
Boat docks and
Or-
boardwalks shall have minimum finished floor.
Dan thinks he found it.
Okay.
B3. Is this it? Impair visibility of the lake from living areas of abutting properties.
Yep.
What page are you on?
We are on page 284.
And so, sorry guys, on mine that I was reviewing last night, it's on 280.
Glenn, are you downloading bootleg versions of our draft land development code?
It may have just been the one you gave me at the beginning.
Oh, okay.
Gotta stay off the dark web, Glenn.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I think,
Don't
sorry.
make me start over.
Your concern is specifically about 3C or talk about so you're basically questioning whether impair visibility of the lakes from living areas and abutting properties. If that's, you're wondering if that's appropriate.
So that is, I think it shows up a couple places, a couple times, but that would be one. I mean, that's specifically referring to an unusual configuration. I'm looking at the one I looked at last night.
Yeah, if you could tell us, chapter and verse, that would help us find what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'll give you more detail.
I think it's 4 talks about the location of it and all the standards, and then we get into 4A does, and 4B is when it talks about impact on neighbors.
Yeah, so 4B is impacts on neighbors.
Purpose, waterfront structure permit procedure, staff review. Review standards. So on 282 is piggybacking on some of the same discussion where it said 50 feet.
Sorry, we're at 2A.
He's talking about 4A2 on page 282.
Yep. Okay, so I can zero in on that one. I'll find the exact other one. Sorry, everybody.
Okay, so now that we know what you're talking about, what do other folks think about that?
Are you concerned that you don't like 50 feet being the maximum?
Yeah, so on this comment, it says in no event shall a boat dock exceed 50 feet. I assume that means the dock itself being out in, how far out into the water it goes?
Mhm.
Or are we defining the boat dock as just the boat portion of the dock itself. I know later on it talks about measuring the boardwalk at the point where it crosses normal high water.
Right, I think that's any structure. So that's like, yeah, that's where you measure it from, right? Is from the normal high water. And it can't go more, the structure cannot extend more than 50 feet into the lake.
Unless approved as a PD.
Or
So
the-
50 feet into the lake as defined by when it starts at the normal high water?
Correct. The normal high water line, which is marked and it's part of the code, it lists the elevations of all the normal high water for all the lakes. At that point, that's where you start measuring at 50 feet.
Yep. So then that part of that is my case in point. And I get not going into 50 feet into the lake itself, but there are situations, one outside of Kathleen's neighborhood, even where if you have a wetland, and in my case, I have a wetland, it needed to go 50 feet before it reached the lake itself. And more often than not, property owners, what they do is they put a seawall in and they fill in behind that seawall, but we should be encouraging to leave the mush and the marsh area down at the water, which is more protective of the water, but your normal high water is going to be in that last portion leading up to the lake. So that boardwalk starting at the beginning of where they can actually not have to, walk through a marshy area might exceed 50 feet. And we wish it did more often, where people left the lakefront alone. But this says in no event shall it ever, and I think there are events when it should.
Well, it does qualify that day, unless otherwise approved by city council.
As part of a PD.
Or
a DA. So you can do a DA without having to do a whole PD.
But in the case of my dock, I had neither. It was approved by city council.
And what mechanism do they approve it?
An appeal from planning and zoning that it exceeded 50 feet, and then they approved it because it needed to exceed 50 feet.
Do you know what mechanism? Do they sign an agreement? Did they just do it as
No.
a vote?
Just a vote.
Okay.
So
Well,
Glenn, your case is, and I guess this may be a little bit of semantics, but your case is essentially a long boardwalk. It's not like you have a 50-foot boat dock. You have a long boardwalk, and then you have a normal distance boat dock projecting into the lake. So I wonder if that terminology is written specifically just addressing the boat dock piece versus
that was-
the boardwalk.
And that was my question, Keith, because this was meant to not be 50 feet into the lake, but this is measuring it by the normal high water where that begins.
Yeah.
And I think there's a guy over off of Adams back in there that's put in a brand new dock that some of the neighbors are complaining because it goes out too far.
I would assume that, and I guess maybe this is a question of the intent, is the part of it I understand is visual, but it's also, I would assume the intent is to, that 50 feet is limiting the waterway. So is that the intent of this? Is it much about not going 50 feet into the normal waterway?
Well, it's navigability and just, I think, impact in general, right?
yeah, and I think Glenn, in your case, it's kind of one of those special circumstances where, like you said, council approved it. This still gives them that opportunity. It would just be through a developer's agreement. They would go to council, ask for an agreement to say, this is an unusual circumstance because we have, a while before we can even get to their water. So in a case like that, they take it a case by case basis.
So is a developer's agreement is is something as simple as council votes that this is a special exception, because I'm not the only one. E2 Homes did a boardwalk back off of those 4 homes he built.
Yeah,
And that boardwalk needed to preserve the wetland and get to the canal. But what this might be saying is that your boardwalk is at a normal high water. So is a developer's agreement more complicated than simply a council vote?
no, it's all it is a council vote. It's just an agreement that's put together by the applicant or applicant's attorney, and then our city attorney looks over it. It's a one vote at the council. They take it and they say, do we agree that this is a special circumstance and this is why we're going to allow this one at a distance of X feet from the normal high water?
Glenn, is that
Okay.
E2 houses you reference? Is that the ones that are off of Northwind?
Correct.
Gotcha.
And those 4 houses built, I think, a 200-foot boardwalk so that they could reach open water. And I just was making sure that when this said in no event, is that appropriate? Because there are some occasions where we want it that way.
Yeah, I think that DA or PD covers those situations.
Okay, if that makes sense to everybody, again,
And
keep-
Page
keep-
50 of this chapter, it talks about the procedure for getting a development agreement. You want to refer, it is an application, staff review, and a city council decision.
and a $5,000 fee.
No, I think they're pretty cheap. We got a buy one, get one free option going on right now.
Yeah, the price of lumber right now would probably be not the most expensive part of your project. Okay, Glenn, do you have you had other comments on waterfront structures, or about the views? You had a couple comments, and I know you're.
Yes.
It appears that your numbering
What is-
system is like a little bit off from ours, so I apologize if that.
Sure. So 281E1, I think is where it is for you. It's the beginning of waterfront structure permit under purpose.
Yep. Oh,
Okay.
sure.
There, under purpose. Do not create boating hazards, minimize water pollution, of course, stormwater runoff, preserve views of water from adjoining properties, and maintain the appearance. So I think the preserve the view of the adjoining property, that's where my question was about what that means and what that empowers your essentially neighbor, I think. Unless this is just an overview and then it gets into specifics.
Well, this is the purpose statement, so it does get, and then it does have, tries to implement that purpose through these criteria and these review standards. Where I think then we pointed out, under no, you can't have any of the significant impacts, and one of the significant impacts is unreasonable interference, which includes impair visibility of the lake from living areas of budding properties. So this is, I think, where that purpose statement is implemented, right? So that's
So
that.
in an unusual configuration, and again, I think this language came from that rectangular lake. When you buy a piece of property,
Yeah.
you look at it, you
Shoreline, right?
study it, you know what if I buy a house and a single story and I can see the lake and the guy across the street from me puts up a 2-story house, I lose my view.
Correct.
And
And there's nothing you can do about that. This would be about, what you're saying is this would be unusual configuration of the shoreline. Like where somebody
So-
alters the shoreline.
no,
Oh.
my next door neighbor, if there's even a situation on Lake Nina, the guy had a sliver down to the lake and he wanted to put in a boathouse. And the neighbor says, you're gonna ruin my view if you put in a boathouse. And I'm saying that neighbor doesn't own the view, whether it's an unusual configuration or not. If staff can look at something and say, you have the right, you meet the setbacks, you own the property, you have that, my neighbor can't say I object.
Well, this isn't really about the neighbor objecting. This would be staff denying the application based on the fact that it impairs visibility of lake from living areas of the property. So it's not necessarily about the ability for somebody to stop it. This would be what staff is looking at.
Denying it, I think, but
And you can talk about whether that's appropriate or not for sure, but
Well, and Glenn, we need to look into this because I think this is all based upon that lawsuit that you were talking about. I think because of that lawsuit, we had to change the ordinance to where adjacent property owners had to get notified and they had input, and there was a whole different thing with that. And so I just want to make sure that if we take anything out, it wasn't in here as a result of the lawsuit.
it was a reaction at that time. And so to me, this was appropriate. I hate when I bog down any of this discussion that, but maybe it's a Cliff or Drew question because it was inserted at that time in response to the lawsuit. But if in reality, I don't, and that's when the 500-foot notification came, and I get all of that, but would you do Garfinkel's dock all over again on Lake Jackson if that property owner had a right to do a dock? Because the neighbor says, hey, you're going to impair my visibility of the lake.
right, because as you point out, we certainly don't do this for other structures.
Right.
For whatever reason, this language has been in here, and I guess it is a kind of a policy decision. At a certain level, it's a policy decision, right?
Yeah, before we do anything, I just want to make sure, because I'm pretty sure it was originally put in here based on the lawsuit. And I think you're right, Glenn. We probably should check with Drew or Cliff to see if that's something that we can remove, and then if so, then if council's comfortable removing it.
Because in reality, the guy who bought the house on the corner would have said, oh no, I mean, if that guy puts in a dock, something might change. Shell Point has examples of this almost on every house, and most of those houses have a dock. But let's say I want to put my dock someplace else. All of a sudden, my neighbor says, you're going to ruin my view or change my view, and I don't like that. Instead of looking to the left, now I have to look to the right. And I'm just not sure they have that ownership. So to me, it is now's the time to revisit this because it was plugged in response to that one situation.
Okay, we'll definitely look into that and ask the attorneys if they will update us on the history of why it was put in there and if it can be amended or not.
Okay, I'm done.
Cool. Keith, you had a question about this with the pitch of the roof on a boathouse?
That was on 5D.
Yeah.
So the question I had is there's, in this 13 feet above lake elevation, well, there's some lake configurations that have high banks that, and again, I didn't go out and look at them, but I was trying to think through this. It seems like there's some scenarios if you had this 13 feet, you couldn't, in a high bank scenario, you couldn't even access. I guess you could like step down. I mean, don't you have some high bank areas over there in your area, Glenn? Is that impacted you? I thought there were some boat houses over there off of that canal that's a bit higher because there's such a high bank up there.
You talking on the Howe Branch or the Howe Branch Canal or the finger?
Yeah, the little.
Oh, yeah, on West Trotters down the street from me.
Yeah.
Now he has a flat roof, which has always been there, and because of the way the elevation of his house, the flat roof gave him a better sight line. They don't allow flat roof anymore.
Right. I'm just reacting to I think that one's one I'm thinking about that he's probably has to be higher than 13 feet just to be able to get
into his, essentially his boat slip because of the way his property steps down.
Yeah. So would that mean that somebody like that would have to get some kind of special provision in this code?
I guess I'm not following it. So you're saying there's a reason why the boat house has to be 13 feet above the water level?
Well, I'm just saying, I think there's cases when there's like a high bank, like houses set up, have a pretty high seawall.
Okay.
And then you're trying to get, to your, so it's, some of those have some configurations where if you were trying to access your boathouse, it needs to be higher than 13 feet. Unless, I guess you could just come on down. I mean, if you had room, you'd have to come on down to the water line and then enter from that way.
Or you're cut into the piece in front of your boathouse itself and create your steps and walkway in.
And I appreciate the intent. So maybe you do have to just have, ask for a variance or something on the exceptions where you just can't make it happen.
That's a spree.
They didn't want any structures that, if you look at the water, they're not 20 feet high or something like that. Because I think this is the existing language we use now is 13 feet.
It is. There's a couple on Minnehaha too. I don't think 13 feet it creates an issue because it still slopes down enough at the water.
Okay. So I'm curious about the pitched roof. What was the design driver for the pitched roof requirements? Just a curiosity.
I can't answer that. My guess is it was just copied from the current code. I'm not sure if it makes it.
But it changed a while back. You're right, Keith. They used to allow it, and you see flat roofs around the lake still, and people like them. And I think they didn't want people putting sitting areas on top of those flat roofs, so they therefore disallowed. I'm not sure that's the right thing. I kind of sometimes, think it's a cool sitting area. But that's why it was changed.
Better sun tanning up there.
I think if that's the intent, I think we need to do something. I mean, if it is about the seating area, I think we should write it that way. I mean, unless somebody wants to tell me there's an environmental reason for a pitched roof is better than a flat roof, but from my perspective, asphalt shingles dripping into the water is not, that's not a better condition.
Okay, how would we rephrase it then?
Well, I guess if it was purely written this way from, for reasons of not having a, maybe a lookout area up above, write it for that reason.
And it is interesting because the people who have flat roofs keep them and they like to use them, and if they had a sitting area, maybe the sitting area should never exceed 13 feet. But the city with the public boat ramp at Fort Maitland is about to take down the boathouse and create a sitting area. It's just not going to be very high up, but I think it's actually going to be higher than normal.
So no sitting area. No.
Yeah, I like where you're going there. I think it's going to be a nightmare, impossible to enforce.
Well, I mean, again, I'm hearing that the intent is to keep things low.
Well,
I've got to go do a pitched roof on it, and now my neighbor gets to look at a pitched roof as opposed to the owl hooting, in the cypress tree. So I'm just trying to say if we have an intent here, let's say it.
Well, I think we either should say we're okay with flat roofs, and we understand if you do that, somebody might put a lounge chair up there and sit up there, and we just have to accept that. So,
Or is it for safety to keep kids from diving off the top of the boat dock?
That list would go on for things if it was meant to just simply protect from kids. And again, you could put a sitting area at your boardwalk if you wanted a sitting area. To Keith's point, a pitched roof is a much bigger structure.
yeah, I have no problem if P&Z wants to take off a pitched roof and be flat. I just don't want to say anything about if we do have a flat, you can't sit up there, because that will be a nightmare to try to enforce. So we either allow it or we don't, and I'm okay either way.
It may be a lakes question, just in case it was ever adopted for environmental reasons, but I don't think so. Because what they care about is what you shade and what you block, and that happens whether it's pitched or flat.
I agree with Keith. Environmentally, if you have a flat roof, you can actually contain some of the water and direct it instead of just going straight off of the shingle into the lake.
I have rain barrels on my dock.
Nice.
A green roof.
So if it's like, so
I think that the question is, are we okay with flat roofs? And if that's the recommendation, then that's the recommendation.
For the purpose of it's less of a structure in the interest of impeding other people's views.
Yeah, again, if there's, I guess that's part of the question here. If somebody can help us understand, was there another reason we're just not seeing?
okay,
Yeah, we can check with our lakes folks that review these and approve these and that were around when all this happened, to see if there was an intent behind that. But if not, and you guys want to remove the requirement for pitch, I've got no problem with that.
Okay.
So Glenn, just kind of along those lines, if you go down to number 6 below that, and it says that, there's no storage areas allowed. What?
So that one I somewhat get, because that was environmental, because people in a storage would put their gas cans, and it just became you're allowed to do deck lockers and things, but they don't allow an enclosed area for storage.
Okay, I didn't know when that was taken out, because when my parents built a dock 45 years ago, we had a storage closet for all the water ski equipment.
Everyone who has one, they'll never get rid of it. It makes so much sense. But if it's somewhere along the way, people get involved and just change those rules for in the interest and betterment of the lakes, but
I mean, that's why I was asking, because that, to me, that's fascinating, because
mhm.
it did have a pitched roof, but it had a storage closet.
Well, I mean, you can enclose your boat. You see those covers come down around your boat and they block, they protect your boat. So essentially you no longer can see through a boathouse. But if
Correct.
somebody wants to screen in their boathouse, you cannot. So some of these things frustratingly,
Split hairs.
you're splitting hairs.
Yep.
All right, good discussion. There, we have the note about the intent of the pitched roof prohibition. Any other commentary you want to capture on this section about waterfront structures?
When you go to page 2-84, this is just a typo correction thing on number 14. House numbers are prominently displayed, and then and. We need to remove the and. But I don't understand the house numbers thing on the dock.
It's a fire thing, polar safety. So if somebody's coming to your house by water, they see the house number.
Because it were rescue too, right? So,
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a fire EMS code.
So that
But they don't
and
know the street.
that and may be purposeful. Does that not sort of is that linking requirements together?
so leading into B demonstrates.
I've seen that done way on some other sections, so I don't know, but that may be a typo. That's just a question. Is it tying it together?
I'm wondering because you don't see it after these 10, 11, and 12.
But
Okay.
yeah, you're right, because A for A is things they have to demonstrate. And then B is things they have to demonstrate. All right, we'll look into that.
Yeah. And we've already captured this one about the impair visibility. So anything else on waterfront structures? That was a good. We kind of jumped around a bit, so that's because of Glenn's curiously numbered document.
Sorry, sir.
Okay.
Actually, on that 2-85. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm ahead of you.
Oh, no, it's fine. 2-85, yes. Vegetation removal permit.
So applicability up at 2A.
Mhm.
It doesn't, I don't understand what this means, where it says, except as exempted in accordance with subsection B below, a vegetation removal permit is required for all development on land other than single family, 2-family, 3-family, 4-family. Why does it say other than? Where is the vegetation removal permit required if it's not required on all of that?
Commercial, multifamily.
Anything but a house and up to a fourplex. So townhouses, condos, multifamily, commercial office. I think we have a whole other section on multifamily.
And then
I don't think those are required. They don't have to get a vegetation removal permit. Do they? And of course, it's exempting the shoreline area. So even if it is, so single family, 3-family have to abide by the shoreline protection standards. It's just vegetation removal permit. It's not required. They still have to meet things like put in construction BMPs and things like that, right? I mean, they have certain standards they have to meet.
Yeah.
for their building permit, but they don't need a special permit just to clear the land.
That the single family they don't need a special.
Correct. They don't need a separate permit.
Okay. Okay, and then on 2B, this is just a liability question. Where it says, in such cases, the Public Works Director shall provide verbal approval. Should we not have that as written approval just to cover ourselves? Because who can, I can call him and say, well, he gave me verbal approval.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I think the intent is like in a storm or hurricane or something where they don't really have time to put in a writing a lot. But maybe now with everybody having a smartphone and something like that, it's a lot easier for the Public Works Director to put something in writing, even if it's in a text or a message.
Just to cover ourselves, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think the intent of this is, as Barrett was saying, is in the case of an emergency where they need immediate removal, but there's no reason why they can't follow up with a written documentation of it.
Yeah, I like that with follow-up written documentation.
Yeah.
Catch, Kathleen.
And then down at the bottom on the footnote, the current provision includes a list of 5 situations where vegetation removal permit is required. What are the 5 situations?
All the current includes a list of 5. So it basically states that it's all developed land that is non-residential and non-duplex developed. So they basically just rephrased it to say, this is a restatement of this, right? All development on land other than single family, 2 family, 3 family, 4 family dwellings. The way the current code says is that it includes all agriculture and developed land excepting non-residential duplex, shoreline protection areas, and rights of way. Is that 5? Yeah, undeveloped. So it's, they're just explaining that the meaning hasn't changed. They've just rephrased it to say all land except single family through 4 family properties.
Okay.
Alrighty. Anything else on vegetation removal? We didn't have another written comment until page 93.
And I got one at 2-90.
All right.
And Dan, since you're here, this is a good time to ask you this question.
I didn't do it.
There's a lot
I didn't do it. Plausible deniability.
Well, because, a lot of this stuff says the community development director shall.
Uh-oh.
And it's like, you've been named, you as the community development director has been, shall review this application, or shall do this, or shall do that. Should some of this say community development director or designee? Because to me, it's like, and I don't know unless this is your typical job description that you automatically already do all this stuff, but seeing it in writing, it just seems like that's a lot of stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, I think we had in an earlier comment, on another review that we had said that we're gonna put a blanket statement that anywhere it listed a specific person we were to add or designate.
Yeah, and I think that is in here. It's either in a comment or it's already in the text.
It might be in the administrative section that says
Yeah.
anywhere it lists the title. If not, we'll
Yeah.
definitely capture that.
So on 3.5, let's look on page 2.9. Let's see what it says. Oh, it's DRC. Oh, no. To QZ, DRC, New Development Director, so 211. No, it doesn't say that there. So I know, I want to say we did specify that somewhere, but we'll make another note. Because it's true. It's always going to be or designee.
Well, and here's a question, and believe me, Dan, we've all shared how grateful we are that you're here now. But let's say that wasn't true of a predecessor or somebody who follows you one day. Is there a way to appeal if I don't like what you've done with your review and approved or denied? I take it we can appeal that to somebody, or somebody could appeal it. I mean,
That's built into all of these.
Yeah.
Post-decision limitations and actions. That's one of the steps in all of these procedures is the appeal process.
yeah, okay, I figured.
Everything that I do gets appealed to Barrett.
Perfect.
That, and to be fair, some of this stuff doesn't. The short-term rentals in particular, it's not a very subjective process, right? It's just like that's why it only goes to the community development director, because it really is just checking the boxes.
Interpretate, yeah, sure.
So there's some interpretation, right?
No, as it should be.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but we had long discussions about that. I'm trying to remember the exact context, but yeah, about there being explicit that anytime that a director is named, it can be their designee. Okay, so now we're in the relief section. Talk about how people get variances. What are relief? Do we, anything else before 93?
Yeah, I had one more thing on 191 just before you.
Oh, sure.
So under 4C with the talking about the short-term rental,
Yes.
and it talks about permanent residency shall be proven through a copy of a valid current government issue ID showing the unit address or 2 months of bills sent to the owner. Should that say and? Because I mean, 2 months of bills sent to the owner, that can easily be manipulated. And I don't, what about, the current government ID? I mean, there's a lot of people who move and don't change their ID. And I'm just wondering, again, aren't we just trying to document that the owner is a permanent resident of that unit in addition to?
It is. I wonder if legally we can, because we have to provide a mechanism that they can demonstrate residency that's not dependent on their ID, or maybe we don't.
Yeah, we could definitely ask that question. This language was what council recently adopted, the short-term rental ordinance.
And that was the other thing. I didn't know if we could change that because of what was adopted by council.
I guess we can. That's what, I mean, it's all up for debate now. It's just a matter of if council's open to doing something that they recently adopted, and I don't see why not if it makes sense.
And the thing that I find a little bit I've struggled with is that they tried to really split the difference between making it be the owner, because here they say the applicant demonstrates the owner is a permanent resident. or a dwelling within the same thing. And it says, shall be proven that the owner or host stay contact at the unit address within the previous 4 months. You're like, well, now it's a host stay contact? I don't know. It's council did that. At the
See,
end.
that's interesting because to me, that's not one and the same. That's two different people.
Correct. So that to me makes it it's a little loosey-goosey for my taste, but that's what our esteemed legal team came up with, so I'm not gonna mess with it. I'll just complain to the community development director if I ever have to implement this.
I'll just
Or
appeal-
his designee.
I'll appeal to Barrett.
In the
Yeah,
case,
I know-
yes.
Isn't that, when we reviewed information on this one, this doesn't look like that was the intent unless city council loosened up.
Council adopted a little bit different version than what P and Z recommended. Some parts of it were stricter, some parts of it were a little bit more lenient, I think, but not a whole lot. I remember there was some conversation about the host stay language, but I don't remember if that was something they explicitly said leave in or not.
So does that mean that, so I could have a short-term rental, and if somebody wanted to stay in that place, they could be my host stay contact as long as they were there. So basically I had provision that they would have to be there for at least 4 months.
Yeah, so like if you owned a duplex and you rented one side out to somebody that's been there, a year long or 2 years long or whatever, and they wanted to rent the other side out for short-term rental, somebody within that duplex or fourplex would have to be not a short-term rental. You can't short-term all 4 of them or 2 of them or whatever. You'd have to have one person that was your contact to resolve all issues and someone that's there more than, or on a long-term lease.
Okay.
See, to me, kind of Keith, what you were just saying. So say I go and rent it for a long term, and then I turn around and start doing short term. Whether I'm renting out rooms or whatnot.
Yeah, it wouldn't be your unit. It would be, if it was like a duplex or a quadplex, you would live in one of them and you would rent the other 3, which is what's allowed now as long as the owner lives in one. But I think in this case, they would have a permanent person that would be there. Like if the person that owned it lived out of state and they just had this duplex, they had one person living there for a long time and they were okay short-terming the other one. That one that was living there for a long time would be their host stay that would have to be responsible for all violations, all issues that had to resolve stuff if there was police calls or whatever. Because the way the ordinance was set up is that the first line of a complaint had to go to the host stay or the owner to resolve it. And if that didn't get resolved, then it would go to code enforcement or police depending on the complaint.
Correct me if I'm wrong, that could also be in a single family house, right? Like one person could be in one bedroom and they could short-term rental the other bedroom or just one bedroom within that house, but they couldn't do the whole house if it was single family unless there was a host stay or permanent resident in that house.
I believe that was what it was.
But they couldn't do it without the consent of the owner because we would catch that during the application process, because if Kathleen's renting a house from Keith and is turning into a short-term rental, Keith's signature would have to be there acknowledged on the application.
Well, I agree with where Kathleen was going with this. I think that what you should have is I think whoever's living there, or if they're the host stay or the owner or whoever's meeting this, they should have a valid government ID with their address on, with that address on it. So, I mean, you could have that one and then it could be an option of the other 2. But to me, you're not really there unless you've documented that with the government.
So you want to change the or to an and?
What do you think, Kathleen? Just force whatever situation is going to be happening here is somebody's got to have a government issued ID showing
I
that they live there, or so it can be that host state person, or it can be.
No, I agree.
Okay. All right, anything else on that before we move into variances and administrative adjustments? Keith, you had a comment on 93.
Yes. So my question sort of comes to this around what I seem to think I've been seeing in some of the footnotes of these documents. So if there is, let's see here. So if we've allowed these different zoning variances, does sometimes when we rewrite these codes, do we edit to sort of, would these become that were non-complying with a variance? Did they become complying? I thought we've sort of captured some of these in this document with some of the footnotes. So I
Yeah.
guess that's what I'm asking, should this be, written in such a manner that they may be included in future? I don't know, but I know it happens. And we're not saying that as one of the limitations or actions.
So you're saying that if somebody needed to get a variance in this new ordinance might make it to where they wouldn't have needed one anymore? Is that
Right. So yeah, they had a variance, but the
Yeah.
new code now, so what happens to those people that are, have this zoning variance that we're saying runs with the land, but now this new code, are they still technically, they have to keep their designation?
Oh,
No, I mean, the
no.
variance wouldn't go away, but they're in compliance now, so it's really kind of a moot variance unless someday the code gets changed back and more stringent or something like that.
Yeah, it wouldn't. It would no longer be necessary, but it wouldn't go away.
Okay.
If it was for a use or for a development standard, right? Like that variances, we don't really give variances for uses, right? I don't think it's more for, a variance would be more for like a side setback. Like maybe somebody got a variance to build an 8-foot side setback. And then in the scenario you're talking about, we changed this new code that the required setback's only 7.5 feet. So now they've got a variance that allows them to have an 8-foot side setback, but it's no longer really relevant because now the code allows it.
Yeah. Well, I guess it makes sense to keep it on there because we could change our mind again, couldn't we?
That's right. I don't think it hurts anything.
Oh, just kidding. We're taking, so yeah, I mean, I guess that could be a loophole. We get them cleared and then put them back at having to come back through a zoning variance the next time the property sells. So, okay, I get it.
The good news is variances are going to now start coming to P and Z instead of PZA.
Yeah. So the Planning and Zoning Commission is going to review variance applications. I hope you guys all caught that.
Yes, I think that was in that other document.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was in the table too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we get into waivers of downtown Maitland. Oh, I'm sorry. Did we? Oh, yeah. You had a comment, Keith, about this intensity and dimensional standards.
Yeah, I like the word. I wasn't, and I went through and I looked at the reference and everything. I just, what it meant by the specific word intensity. I like the word. I just wasn't sure I could put a definition even in looking at the section. of
What
why
we do, what
use
we
the
refer
term
to as
intensity.
intensity is things like FAR, floor area ratio, and density, as opposed to like so like number of units and floor area ratio,
Okay,
as opposed to the dimensional standards, which are like setback.
so it's amounts or more the volume or amount than
Yeah.
the dimension. Okay.
That's right. So like the dimensional standards are gonna set like setbacks, but then like, and things like not lot coverage, but impervious surface area, open space requirements, all those things are covered there. Yeah. Also, some of the intensity standards are set at the comprehensive plan level, CDP, that will control the maximum intensity of a piece of property due to its future land use.
So if I was to use it in a sentence, I could say the number of trees you've chosen is very intense.
I'm not sure if you could say that. You could certainly, and I would know what you mean. But that's important because I in some ways, P&Z can't, right? P&Z can't just arbitrarily waive the intensity standards 25% because it's capped by the comp plan.
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, there's certain intensity standards that do have the flexibility. That's like a small building expansion that might not be exactly, the FAR or something like that, but you cannot increase density without, under a specific zoning. You can't just arbitrarily increase zoning without a rezon, or density without a rezoning if it's already fixed.
And this refers to downtown specifically. So in downtown, the comprehensive development plan sets out certain FAR and density maximums that staff nor P&Z can supersede. But that's a bit of a digression, but just so we're clear on that.
I just want to make sure we were getting as much power as Dan has.
Yep. Thanks. Duly noted. All right. Moving into vested rights. Do we have anything else before that? Before page 105? I feel like commissioners must really want to hear what Dan's surprise is at the end of this review.
What's that?
Oh, no. Just kidding. I was making a joke about Dan's promise of a surprise at the end.
Oh, yeah.
So moving into appeals, here's your appeal section, Glenn. Where's the appeals to P&Z when you disagree with Dan's decision? And vested rights. Keith, you had a question about the examples.
Yeah,
right?
I was just curious of an example of this. I was not at the time I was trying to think through an example, and I was just curious to help me sort of connect with this a little better.
Well, there hasn't been one in the city. There have been very few occasions where this is kind of like.
It's pretty rare, and we haven't done them in at least 10 years or more, but kind of a somewhat of an example is Gem Lake. When they tore down all of those apartment units, they wanted those units vested for school concurrency impacts or things like that. So that way they were allowed to go in there and do that same amount of units without having to pay any additional school impacts, and they were vested from their capacity or their holding capacity at the schools.
Gotcha.
So they have within 2 years of a change, right?
Yeah.
Submission. You have a question about this affidavit executed by the applicant. That's the truth, accurate, veracity of the application, all attachments.
Yeah, it was just mainly, I didn't go back and sort of try to look, but was this really the only place in the section that we referenced a notary public attesting?
That's a good question. I didn't go back and check either. It's not standard. And I'm wondering if there's something about unique to the vested rights process that would make them get an affidavit. Maybe it's because a lot of times it's things that happened in the past that they don't necessarily have documented.
I don't know, like I said, we haven't done them in at least 10
Yeah.
years. Definitely not in Barrett and I's time here.
We can add a note to I think it's fair to add a note to say like,
We,
why an affidavit with this application?
we used to back in my old days when I worked for Osceola County, vested rights were pretty popular because at the time you had like school concurrency and you had concurrency vested rights and things like that. I don't think they're so much applicable anymore, especially in a city that's as built out as we are.
But I guess the notary comes about because technically, isn't this a document that is an agreement between the city and
Absolutely.
the applicant? So somebody from both sides have to sign this?
Yeah, and it's recorded. It's recorded at the clerk's office.
It's just in the
So I guess that's the question. Are there other documents to that level? And if they are, do they need to have this notary reference? Because I don't think I saw that anywhere else.
right. It's a good question. Like what, I get what you're saying is that for the
Yeah.
final agreement, certainly, but for the application, I wonder why.
I don't know, maybe unless they're attesting that they are the property owner that's asking for vested rights and they're not trying to vest somebody else's property that they don't own. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we can ask them why that's necessary there.
Okay.
Yeah. That was the last written pre-submitted comment. Did anybody else have any other comments on the rest of Article 2, Section 2.5, application-specific review procedures and decision standards? Interpretations.
We would have more
Yeah.
comments if Dan hadn't given us that tease. Now we're all like quiet because we want to hear what's going on.
Yeah.
If I'd have known that, I would have said up front that you have to get through the rest of the document before I do it.
But before we switch gears entirely, can we talk about next steps?
Yes.
So congratulations for making it thus far. The rest of Article 2, the last portions of this module are Article 8 and Article 9. And they are very short. Even though it's 2 whole articles, Article 8 is 8 pages long, and Article 9 is 3 pages long. And then there's 1 page of temporary definitions. So after this module, you will have coming to Module 2C, which contains 2 additional sections. We are finally which are all placeholders that you read past. One is the West Side Maitland Zone District, which took a little bit of additional time and development. And the other is
The cultural arts and history overlay.
the Cultural Arts and History Overlay, which is the successor of the Cultural Corridor District. And it's an overlay district that has the exact same boundaries as the Cultural Corridor. That's the rest of the code. So we are waiting on our consultants. Staff got Module 2C under review. We already provided our comments a couple weeks ago. So Clarion is right now making those revisions based on staff comments. We don't know. We'll have a phone call next week to kind of go over some of the final revisions that they're going to make. So what I think we should do is we will hope to get that to you as soon as possible. And then in our next session, we can schedule that based on the timing of when you get that document. And we can try to cover Article 8, Article 9, and then Module 2C, which is about between 35 and 40 pages. You only have about 55 pages for your next section, and then you will have completed the entire review of the land development code. The next part of that will be we will compile all of your comments throughout modules 1, module 2, module 2B, module 2C, assemble them into one table or one document, and get them to you to review and formally provide those comments and requests for changes and formally adopt it at a vote at a public hearing. That's what needs to happen in person at a public hearing. So we will be scheduling that. Ideally, we'd like to get that document to you in plenty of time for you to review it. So I think the decision that we have to make, and I think it will depend somewhat on the timing of when we get Module 2C to you, is whether we will try to get that comment list to you at a public hearing when we can advertise it. We can finish the review and then discuss and vote the comments over the entire land development code at the same time, or whether we have a workshop that discusses the rest of the code and then at a subsequent meeting vote on the comments. So that's still to be determined, but those are basically the two next steps. Whether that happens at one meeting or 2 meetings is still to be worked out.
Do you guys have any preference either way on that?
Let me ask a question first for we. So I'm trying to remember, we've got this thing in different piecemeals, and my memory was that there were some of these documents that were referring to, documents that were either we didn't have or have since been edited. So I guess if you could help us understand, because if we go through and you're expecting us to look and make a motion, but if we start running across these that are tied to something that we were waiting on in the future, can you help us sort out that and understand what we may have been missing at the time?
No, absolutely. I think when we compile all the comments together, you'll see that some of the comments are things like, we think this should be changed. Some of the comments were clearly talked about, and then when we said that's discussed at a later one, we'll note those separately, so you can confirm whether the issue at that time was addressed later on.
And I don't know if this helps, but to clarify, when we go back to module 1 hasn't been edited since you reviewed it. And none of these documents have been changed or modified since your review occurred. So you should be able to go back to module 1 and have the comments still match up. It's like none of the documents have changed since you reviewed them.
So it hasn't even gone back to the consultants for the questions that we had or the corrections?
No, because you haven't formally adopted those as your questions or comments. Those have to vote in public at meeting in person.
Okay, so we're not voting, or we're not proposing that, okay, we're done with this. We're just saying, hey, here are the comments that we want you to do, and then we'll get to see the completed document at another time.
Once you guys vote on which comments you want to forward to the consultant, we send those to the consultant, and then we come back with the whole document all together in one with the changes that were made or that were made or agreed upon or not or whatever. And then then we start doing the next part of the process, which is a joint work session with P&Z and council and the consultant and staff. Any changes or tweaks that come out of that are made, and then we start the actual public hearing process where we do go through a quick testing phase, and then we actually go through the public hearing process where we have public hearings and formally adopt the code.
Okay, that's fair.
But we couldn't send any of your comments to the consultant yet because they weren't voted on at a public meeting to say, these are what we want to move forward or not.
Okay.
But anyway, so I'm excited. We're really close. We're really close to the finish line now. Like I said, I think we'll be able to finish our text review in one last final session.
And we can rip up all those little variances we don't need anymore.
So is the plan then, because we don't know when you'll get 2C to us, that we won't have a meeting in 2 weeks, that
We might.
we'll actually have time off for good behavior?
No, there's no good behavior. We might, if we get it in the next few days, then we'll flip that right around to you and have a meeting. If we don't, where Barrett was talking about whether we finish it and then do the adoption or the formal vote on the same meeting, that gets a little bit more tricky because then we have to advertise it, and advertising takes time. We have to advertise it 15 days ahead and blah, blah, blah. So that plays into whether we do it all at once or we finish the review and then come back again and do the vote.
We'll know, in terms of finalizing your schedule, we'll know whether we're going to have a meeting on May 2nd, 3rd, 4th, May 4th. I think May 4th is.
No, that
not on
would
my
be-
calendar from me. But that will be forthcoming soon. I would say if not by tomorrow, by early next week.
And you're not here on the 4th? So no early Cinco de Mayo celebration of finishing the code?
Possibly, probably not.
Barrett's going to be out of town, so he's doesn't want to miss the
I
finale.
don't want to miss the finale. But
So
we'll see.
my question was, because the next meeting would be in 2 weeks on the 29th, and then we turn around and meet on the 6th?
No, it's the meetings are on the 1st and 3rd Thursday of the month. So because April has 5 Thursdays, the next scheduled meeting isn't actually until May 6th.
Okay, that's what I was asking. I didn't know if we would have another one.
Oh, no.
Not
Sorry, misunderstood your question. Yeah, the next possible meeting will be May 6th.
Okay.
And then the next meeting after that would be May 20th. We'll want to kind of pencil those dates in. And we'll know whether we'll have enough time to get you those documents for a May 6th meeting by the early part of next week. And so I think, sorry for belaboring that, but thank you for listening and asking good questions. I think we're ready for the portion of the evening where Dan gets to show you cool stuff.
I hope you're not too excited because then you'll get really let down by this. Doesn't meet its expectations.
Yes, this is only exciting to professional planners.
Yeah. So a couple of the things that we have been working on for a couple years that we are slowly starting to get into, and actually let me do this because I don't know if that will work.
There we go.
We have launched our first GIS map online right now, and it is a public hearing and development and process map. Let me see if I can get you here. Okay, you can see the screen here? Anybody?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a map that we've launched. It's out available to the public now. What this is that anybody from the public can go in and look for any project that is in the pipeline now, any development plan, site or subdivision plan, or any public hearing that's coming up. And as with GIS, you can click on or off the layers to have the different information show up. They're color coded into whether they're pending, whether they're approved with conditions, or denied. In a case of like a public hearing, you can go in and you can click on any of them. And I know it's probably hard to read here, but on your screen it's a lot bigger, but it'll give you all the information about the case, what it is, what's being proposed, when the next public hearing is, who's hosting the public hearing. Same thing with development plans. You can go click on a development plan and get the attributes. And this one, it's the Grove of Trelago. It's how many units, how many square feet were approved, if it's approved, if it's pending, if it was denied. So this is something that we update regularly as cases come in. And the idea is that citizens, residents, developers, whoever can go in there now and see what's going on around town, what's currently active cases. If it's a public hearing, we're going to take it off the map about 30 days after the public hearing, after the final public hearing, whether that's P&Z or council, just so we don't clutter the map too much. And a development plan, we're going to keep them up until the CO is issued, because we know that people ask questions a lot. What's going on over here? I see dirt moving. I see wood being assembled or whatever. So this is the development, I guess, public hearing map and current development plans that is now live and active on our website. You can get to it by going to the main website. It's by Maitland, and then you can either get it under Community Development Department. There's a tab called GIS Mapping, or you can go on the main homepage and under permits, there's a maps page that you can get to it. So this will be updated regularly as cases come in and out. We are going to be adding more maps soon. There's going to be a parks identifier, parks locator map that you can go in and you can click on all the parks in the city, get attributes such as, is there a boat ramp there? Are there restroom facilities? Are there playgrounds? So all of that, and that one's getting ready to launch. That one's not too far away, probably within the next week or two, I would imagine. Shortly after that, or actually maybe even before that, we're going to launch a future land use map where you can go in and get the adopted future land use designations. You can click on any parcel, get the attributes of the future land use, what the maximum density or the range is, the intensity standards about the floor area ratio, what the general permitted uses are within that district, what the intent is. That's going to be coming online fairly soon too. We've obviously held off on the zoning one because we think all the zoning districts are going to change in the next 4 months, hopefully 4 to 5 months with the adoption of this code. But that's one that we're starting to build so that you could go in and click on any zoning and get all the attributes of that zoning district, setbacks, height limitations, what your minimum house size is, things like that. In a case of PDs, we're going to try to populate all the PD data in there, all the use specific standards of a PD. If there's a development order, we're going to try to incorporate a lot of that information there as well. So it's going to take a lot of the phone calls and emails off of us, because we're going to provide all this information to the public at their convenience. So this is something that we're actually excited about. We've been working on it for a while. We purposely kept it very simplistic on this one. We wanted it very intuitive and easy to use, and we didn't want to overcrowd it with too much data or too much complexity to it. So that's why it looks very Easter egg-like and very simplistic.
Hey, Dan, this was one of the systems, didn't they show in one of the planning conventions, I think? Is this that I went to, is that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of jurisdictions use it. We're starting to build it. And then when the ADA stuff came out and we had to take a lot of stuff off the website, we kind of put this on hold. We were actually going full steam with this for a while. And then we focused on public works mapping, utility lines, water sewer lines, meter locations, fire hydrants. So we started building more the infrastructure first. Fortunately, we beat them to the public part of the maps, because then we jumped back on and started doing ours. But it's, there's going to be a lot more maps to come. Yeah, a lot more ease and research and due diligence. Right now in our EnerGov system, our online permitting system, you can actually go in there and click on any parcel, and every permit that's been issued in our system will pop up, and and you can link to the permit itself. So we're starting to get more information out to the public, more information out for research. And so that's something we're real excited about what's coming ahead. A lot of what we're doing with this is really being able to give P&Z and council really better decision-making tools through information and data, having different things. And I know, Kathleen, we talked about this with that little webinar that you watched
Yep.
Some of that information, we actually have, some of it we haven't released yet to the public because we're still building it. But a lot of planning and good use of the land, whether it's economic or environmental sustainability, is really based on data-driven decisions. And so we're trying to build that database tool of having that at council of P&Z's fingertips.
Hey,
This is
so
nice.
Dan, say it again. Sorry, Keith. Say
Right.
it again. How it's you go to It's My Maitland and then it's under what?
Yeah, so if you go to our main website, it's mymaitland.com. Let's see. See if you could still see this. So under the city website, there's a couple different places. If you go to government and community development, which is over here, then it's under mapping and GIS. But if
I think you're on mute. There you go.
under the main page of the website, if you go under businesses, it's right here, maps.
Got it.
So both of those will get you to where you need to go.
Dan, is this it's nice. Is this specific to Maitland, or does this tie to some, other broader state? Because I know the GIS stuff. But does this tie to anything else, or is it just a local file to Maitland?
Well, it's an Esri-based tool, which is global, and
Yeah.
so a lot of jurisdictions go with Esri now. It's the biggest one of all the GIS tools. So you can go on Esri's site and click on maps and find maps from all over. And depending on what that jurisdiction decided to release to the public, you can get that information. Some stuff obviously is protected, like water and sewer lines for security reasons and things like that. But a lot of jurisdictions have a lot more information on there because they've been building it for a long time, or they've been not hit with the ADA stuff. The good thing about Esri is they take that ADA liability off of us, and they have it fixed on their web mapping site.
Gotcha.
So the things that, like the bike ped master plan, that's going to soon be put up here as well, so you can see all the bike and pedestrian connections and where those connects to other cities and things like that. We can tie those into the surrounding jurisdictions GIS layers too, and kind of show it on a bigger scale. But we got one person building the map, and so it takes a little while to get stuff done, but we are cranking them out as fast as we can now that we got past the initial slump.
Very nice.
It's cool.
So yeah, and if you see stuff that you would like for us to add, if it's something we can add, we will. Certain map layers that you'd like to see, absolutely, we'll take recommendations, and if it's possible, we'll do it. If it's not, then we'll let you know.
Then a while back, and I can't remember what this was, but you showed something that was, my memory of it was a bit of had a volume to it, the map did, and I thought it was sort of showing some tax basis type stuff. And I thought that was just, to look at that that was very informative for somebody to look at and go, okay, now I get the impacts of this, this apartment or this city center, how it benefits the city. I thought that was a good document to look. I don't know if that's something like that can in the future tie in just to help inform the city, the residents.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is one that we are currently working on. We're working on the tax valuation for parcel map. But what we're also working on with that is a sliding scale. So you can go historically over time and see what was the tax value of this parcel back in 1960? What was it before we approved this development? What is it after? To show the economic impact of what development does to the city. So that's a little bit more intensive build, but we have some of the layers already put into place. We just need to utilize the time of the resources we have to get things going. But that is one on our to-do list of that sliding scale map of tax value.
Yeah, great
nice.
information too.
Yeah. And Kathleen, you and I talked about that with that webinar. That was a real eye-opening part of their presentation.
Dan, do you want to share the other half of the?
Sure. So the other thing that we'll preview for you real quick is we have talked about in the land development code from time to time. Where am I going with this?
Other one, back to the other screen. You did it right, Zoom, and then that window.
Okay, sorry. So what we've talked about throughout this LDC is the procedures manual, and you've heard that come up several times. And you guys have questioned, what is the procedures manual? What is it? What does that mean? And we refer to a lot the landscape palette that we're building. And so what the landscape palette is, this is a very, very rough draft of what we've got, but it's getting close to being where we need it. But the landscape palette is just a resource, a supplement to the land development code where it says you have to plant these plants, or you can get with the community development director and they can choose other plants and things like that. So the landscape palette, what it does is it outlines all the different types of trees that are acceptable to this region and this area that can grow. And it's separated. I know it's hard to read at this scale, but obviously on your screen you can blow it up. It's separated in canopy trees that are deciduous, canopy trees that are evergreen. Then you have ornamental trees, deciduous and evergreen, and then you have shrubs and grasses. And it gives you information about the scientific name, the common name, how fast it grows, how high it grows, how far out it spreads, the rate of growth, how drought tolerant it is, and then some little facts about it when you're looking at plants and choose a plant for your development. So if you want to know, you want something that's beautiful and red flowers and attracts bees, you can get that information here with pictures of all the plants. And based on the ordinance, whether it's a streetscape, a type of streetscape, a thoroughfare, a type 1, 2, 3 street, the buffer types that you've all been reviewing in the ordinance, what's allowed in landscape buffers and perimeter buffers and single family houses. And the way it's set up is red is prohibited. Yellow is permitted as long as there's no overhead power lines. And then green is permitted. So all the different tree types that grow to this region are listed in whether they would work in that certain situation or not, based on the ordinances that you guys have been reviewing and what you guys have said, what we want here for this type of buffer and this and that. Everything from trees to shrubs to grasses. The yellow highlighted or cream color highlighted is actually a native, it indicates it's a native species to this region. So that comes into play because there's a lot of push for having a certain percentage of native species that in a lot of land development codes that are being written now, a lot of them will say, 60% of the vegetation planted needs to be native to the region or locally grown, locally native. So we outline those that are not only locally native, but you can buy at a local nursery. And so we've outlined those. We also get into, once you get, and of course this is the key, and these are the standards that have been set that you guys have been reviewing. It also talks about what is permitted in wetland specific vegetation from the littoral zone and the upper medial zone. So if you're looking for a BMP, or if you're along a wetland area and you want to know what vegetation that we would accept in those areas, this outlines the same criteria, the characteristics about which plants or which vegetation it is, pictures of what it looks like, and which ones that the city would accept within those zones. So again, the landscape palette is just a supplement to the land development code, but it allows developers to have a variety of trees that have already been identified by staff, by our landscape architect, our arborist, of which trees will grow in this area, which trees are specific to this section of Central Florida, and the attributes of where they would fit in based on the regulations that you guys have been reviewing and hopefully recommending. So
Now, is that on the website yet, or
no, No, you are the only ones that have seen it besides Barrett and I.
Okay.
And public.
And Public
That's-
Works.
I
you know,
like it.
architect. So again, similar to that map that I showed you, it's meant to be very intuitive. It's either yes, no, or maybe in certain situations, and it's made to make it more user friendly, but give developers or homeowners a choice of what vegetation works where, and if I want something that's going to promote butterflies, I can look for that and see what's going to work in that area.
Right, because the code just simply says, you have to select from these Florida-friendly species from a database maintained by the University of Florida for the Central Florida region. And then this really illustrates it, right? I mean, that takes that little dry bit of code and then makes it a lot more user-friendly for our citizens and the development community.
I think it's great because, you know, we've been talking about something like this for LAB for years. So
You
to
can't
actually
have it
have
in the dark.
something available to them now, you know?
Yeah, and this, and I know you guys talked about it the last couple of meetings, the procedures manual. This is part of the procedures manual. The rest of the procedures manual is purely a technical document of the submittal requirements.
Checklist.
Yeah, checklist of what the applicant needs to submit. It's not regulatory, it's a technical document. So while you guys will be able to see it, there's really nothing to vote on or nothing to say yes or no, because it's a staff technical document. So we're going to show you the procedures manual. The landscape palette is part of that procedures manual. We're going to show that to you when we have all the comments done and we put the whole code together, because it is adopted by reference to the code. It's not adopted as the code, it's by reference. So that way, if something changes and we need to change a submittal requirement, we no longer want 3 sets of plans because we're now fully digital, we can change it without having to go back through the whole process in public hearings. So any questions or comments on these?
I like it.
Okay, a lot of work went into this. A lot of help from Vance and his group of friends that work with the Florida Native Vegetation Society. He hooked us up with them. We had some good conversations with them. Got some great resource material that helped build this overall thing. And this actually, you know, when Keith, you went to the FAPA conference with us. Back then, Vance went to the FPGA conference with us, and there was a jurisdiction that had a teeny tiny landscape palette, but it was really cool, and Vance really liked that. And we said, you know what, Vance, I'll make a deal. If you ever become a city council member, we'll do one for you. Not really, but yeah, I mean, it was a great idea. So we took that concept and we expanded on it probably tenfold or more.
Nice.
So that's all the excitement I have. I hope it wasn't a big letdown. Sorry.
No, I mean, I was good with the first one. This was just, you know, this was like more icing.
Should I saved it and done it in reverse order?
No, it's good.
Okay.
I know the review of the land development code is just so much adrenaline that it's really hard to top the excitement level generated by that. But I think you did. I think you succeeded.
Trying a lot of sleepless nights working on this stuff.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Very good. Hey, I do have a question on the market. You guys mentioned, I think the last that they were going after the permit. Is that still, are they still in the permit phase?
Yes, they're at the site permit. So as soon as they're finished with that, which will hopefully be pretty soon, then they go in for their building permits and do all the interior renovations and exterior.
So it's parking lot stuff that they're getting ready to do now, right? The parking lot configuration.
They got to rip up the parking lot and put in the underground infiltration system and all that stuff.
Yeah.
When is the one that we saw last week over on Sibilia Parkway? What's their schedule?
You'll probably see them again in maybe June, maybe July. They're in DRC review right now. We're in a technical review. So they're getting, I would guess probably another month or two with that, and then it'll come back to P&Z for final vote.
So it will depend on how many resubmittals they do based on their first round of comments.
And can you share some of the stuff that you guys took away from our meeting? Have you already met with them as a follow-up, or that hasn't happened? It has, yeah.
We have met with them, just us. We haven't met as a TRG or technical review group yet. So the planning staff has met with them. They actually did hear you guys a lot, and they have made some changes already based on what they heard, including beefing up some of the, well, they definitely really enhanced their justifications and really put a lot of effort into why they're justifying it. They've looked at other small tweaks, and some of that, when staff gets their first comments in, that make them do some changes also based on, you know, some of the engineering of the site or something like that. We don't know yet, because that's coming May 14th, I believe, is when they get their comments. And then we meet with them as a technical staff on the 17th. So I think it'll be, it might look a little different when it comes back to, we're not sure yet. We'll see how much has to be changed, but the developer was definitely a lot more open to change after P&Z than prior to it.
Yeah, that can usually help.
Yeah.
I thought everybody asked very good questions. All parties involved, I thought there was pretty high level of discourse about the project. So I was pleased about that. And that's all we have. I mean, like I said, we'll get, hopefully, we'll get you module 2C as soon as possible, and we'll just have to see when that is.
And once we get it to you, when we send it to you, we'll ask the question, you know, how much time do you want before we schedule the next one? And we're so close to the finish line, 2 more meetings, and then we get to see the whole big package together. And it's been what, 1.5 years already almost?
Mm-hmm.
It's been a long journey, but we're almost at the end.
So I appreciate, like, you guys sending that pizza to my house tonight. I assume you did that for everybody.
Way to ruin it for
Yeah. Now you messed it up for everybody in the future.
I wondered what the dogs were going crazy about out there.
Yeah, we're almost there. This is great. And once we vote on those comments of what we're going to forward to them, it's all smooth sailing from there, right?
Yep, I'm so excited to get all of the modules combined into one in order document. I kind of was mocking it up a little bit, and I think we're going to be right in around between 620 and 650 pages for the entire document.
So when you send all those comments back, and we all debated them, you know, a fair amount as they came up, is the idea, I mean, you just litigate all of those things, or?
Hopefully not.
Please don't.
No, hopefully,
you're right too.
So when we discussed them, there was probably a good portion of them that after discussion, whoever brought it up said, okay, never mind, I'm fine, let's move on. So those you probably aren't going to see again, because it seemed like that wasn't a comment anymore. There's going to be quite a few comments where you said check back with a consultant and see if this is possible. Those we're gonna keep to see if you still want us to do that. And then there's those that you guys said we really think this should be changed from X to Y. Those will definitely be brought back to you guys to say yes, do you still agree with those or not?
I'm going to go through and be very careful to not alter the meaning of the comments, but maybe clarify them, check for spelling mistakes, add punctuation. If there's anything I can do to add clarity to the comments, where sometimes we're going kind of fast, sometimes we're, you know, two hours into it, and we might have. I want to make sure that it's clear. So I will go back and try to at least edit it for clarity and precision. If there's wording that you don't agree with, by all means, that's a thing to tweak and check. But hopefully it will be, like you said, you'll look at it, you'll say, oh yeah, I remember making that comment. Let's approve it and pass it on.
So how will we see the ones that, a lot of them we just wanted to understand what the intent, so we weren't necessarily asking that at the time, we weren't asking for a change,
Mhm.
but how will we see those?
How I see it happening is we transmit those comments and then Clarion and or staff together can respond, right? And it'll be a little bit of a dialogue. You'll get a written response to those if it's not clear what it is. So if the change results in an edit to the document, that will be documented. And then if the change is just a discourse, oh, this is why this is the way, then you'll get that response.
Okay.
That's how I see it, at least.
And in the end, after all your comments are compiled and voted on, yay or nay, whether they move forward, then staff will go over all of them, everything, and it will be sent into Clarion, and Clarion will put together the document. Doesn't mean staff is going to necessarily agree 100% with all of your comments. We don't know yet because we haven't seen them all yet, or seen what you guys are moving forward or not. But Clarion is going to make the changes, and anything that there is any disagreement on that staff disagrees with P&Z, that's going to be, of course, at the joint workshop where you guys and council will be there, and the council will make the, yeah, we think we should go with staff on this one, or yeah, we think we should go with P&Z on this one. I don't think there's going to be many that we disagree on. I think it's very few, but we don't know until we hear the final say of what you have to move forward.
Tell them to be kind. Don't respond back, hey, you guys had silly questions. So tell them to be kind.
Right. Well, that's where Barrett said he's not going to edit anything other than punctuation, because he doesn't want to change the intents by accident, and then one of you say, well, that's not really what I meant, and we want to try to get through that meeting with or without pizza fairly quickly too.
Well, right, and that's the purpose, to look over it one more time.
Yeah.
And then I'd be like, oh, there might be stuff back from module 1 that you're like, oh, now that I've seen module 2, now that I saw article 5, this makes perfect sense. Let's strike comment 13 or whatever it may be. So I imagine there will be some of that, where stuff that maybe didn't quite make sense when you looked at it the first time might make sense now that you've seen all the documents.
And this is huge. Keith, were you on when we adopted the comp plan?
Yes.
I think you were. So after we adopt this, we're going to go out and celebrate.
All right.
We'll go somewhere and we'll celebrate, and because this is a huge deal. I mean, Barrett is going to put together the total hours spent on this document, because I think it's going to be eye-opening to all of us how many hours we put into this, and it's definitely worth celebrating. And I can't thank you guys enough for all of your time and effort of reading this and asking really good questions, and questioning why do we do this or why are we not doing that, and that's what's going to make a better code and a better community. And next time you see Matt, you can say we got to see those super surprises at the end, and you didn't get to see it because you didn't show up.
He's gonna have to go to YouTube to watch it.
That's right.
My internet dropped right as you were showing that, so I may have to call you back this week or the next couple days to see it.
You can go on YouTube too, Glenn.
Yeah. We'll be glad to have anybody in here and show them a more in-depth, easily readable. Not that you can't go on the website and do it yourself now, but
From the landscape palette.
yeah, landscape palette is in a super secret vault.
Yeah.
Well, your internet went out because you were getting a pizza.
Yeah, sorry.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I guess we are welcome to adjourn, unless you guys have anything else you want to bring up, or if you're bored and don't want to go watch TV or whatever.
No, nothing for me.
Good.
Well, thanks again. I echo what Dan said. Thanks again for all your hard work and for spending time with us this evening.
All right. Thank you guys. Thanks,
Technical
everybody.
difficulties, the rest of the document.
See ya.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Take care. Good night. Thank you.